Welcome to the Traitors, a Traitors podcast, a Spotify Top 10 podcast. My name is Matthew. I'm a writer working in TV development, and I'm a 100% faithful fan of the multi-award-winning hit TV competition series The Traitors. Most episodes of the podcast deep dive into individual episodes of The Traitors from around the world, but every now and then the Traitors features interviews with contestants from the shows. In fact, you could go back and listen to interviews with cast members from UK Season 1 and 2, US 1, Australia 1 and 2, and The Traitors Canada. Today, though, I am continuing my coverage of The Traitors New Zealand Season 2 with the second of our contestant interviews, and I'll introduce them in just a few minutes. But firstly, we are going to have a TT News segment to catch up on some important Traitors info. Firstly, and very importantly, you can vote for the Traitors, a Traitors podcast, in this year's British Podcast Awards in the Listener's Choice category. Voting is free online and very simple, as long as you spell the name of the podcast correctly and choose it from the selection that will appear before you. The link to the voting page is on the podcast social media, and I'll put it in the episode description here. Or you could just search British Podcast Awards Listener's Choice, and you'll find it super easily. All you need to make sure you do after voting is to check your email and confirm your vote so that it is counted. I would so appreciate the support from the loyal Traitors listeners. I'd love to offer some sort of reward for voting, but I'm pretty sure that counts as bribery. So instead, I'll just say that I can thank you here on the podcast if you send me a message to let me know you voted. When you vote online, you can even share a pic on your own social media to show that you voted. Thank you already to Joe, Megan, Christopher, Linda, Claire, Stephen. They've all voted, as well as Paul from Traitors Australia Season 1, the famous Paul, and Ash, one of the Traitors from UK Season 2. I have no idea how many votes it would take to get shortlisted, but I think if even half the people who subscribe to the Traitors on YouTube and Spotify and Castbox and so on were to head to the website and vote, surely there would be a chance, and I would be eternally grateful and probably have a little cry. The Strange Affair of Paul has finished its run at the Camden Fringe. The play, as I've mentioned before on the podcast, is all about a man who becomes addicted to the Traitors and particularly fixated on Paul from the Traitors Australia Season 1 and his mysterious edit in the show. If you know, you know. I saw the show on its closing night, and writer and performer Callum Jones was on top form. I loved the show, laughed all the way through it, and it was a surreal experience to hear clips from the Traitors in the show and on the screen. I also met a Traitors listener at the show, which was lovely too. The play has now had a couple of 4-star reviews from various fringe theatre review blogs, and Callum is hoping the show will reappear elsewhere soon. So I'll keep listeners up to date in case you have the chance to go and see it somewhere else. Next, this isn't strictly Traitors news, but it is podcast adjacent news. Former multiple-time guest co-host of the podcast, Chris Weir, is currently performing his stand-up comedy show, Well Flung, at the Edinburgh Festival Fringe for the whole month of August. I've seen the show before and it is ridiculously funny, and if you remember Chris from the podcast, you'll know how hilarious he always is. So if you're in Scotland and are heading to the Fringe, please check out Chris's show. It's on until the 26th of August at the Gilded Balloon, and there are big fancy posters of Chris up around Edinburgh. I'll be travelling back up to Scotland from London for the last week of the Fringe, so you might even see me wandering around. And I'm hoping to meet up with Chris there for a Traitors reunion too. Additionally, I must recommend Chris's podcast, Chris and Crystal in Heat. It's so funny, and I've listened to every episode. The second season is about to begin. It's also very X-rated, as is Chris's stand-up show, so don't go listening with the kids. Now, on to the main feature for today. After my chat with Traitor Mike in the previous episode, I was able to get another interview, this time with a standout faithful from this year's Traitors New Zealand. and that is Andrew. Let's meet the faithful who was definitely banished way too soon. Welcome to the trader, Andrew Alamora. Andrew, did I say that okay?
You did. Very good. Alamota. Perfect.
How
It's
you
great to be here,
doing?
Matthew.
How you doing today?
I'm good. I'm really good. I'm dialing in from the sunny part of Central California, and it's a beautiful, bright day. My friends just got married, and I'm happy to be on the show today.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, listeners might expect that you're in New Zealand, but you're in a completely different time zone. I spoke to Mike from the show a couple of days ago, and it was morning for me, it was nighttime for him, and now we're kind of doing the opposite. So it's sort of morning for you, isn't it?
Yeah, it's the democratic approach, right? It's 8 a.m. for me, which is perfect timing. I'm gonna go grab brunch with my friends after this, so it's gonna be a good day.
Yes, and you on your Instagram, which I'm sure you'll tell us about later, looks like there's some lovely pics of where you are, so it looks like you're having a great time.
Yeah, the wedding was in a place called the Madonna Inn, which I discovered was actually the cover of Vogue's Kitsch issue. So it's the kitschiest wedding I think I've ever
Ah,
attended.
amazing.
Um, yeah, it's a good time.
Yeah. Now I've got lots of questions to ask you. Before we dive into them, we're gonna try and play the game that I always play in the podcast with guests. This is the Trader Traitor. So, The Trader Traitor is a game within a podcast about a game. The mission for Andrew and I from here on in is to try and tell a lie to the other person at some point during our chat. The lie has to be a fabrication, a made up fact, big or small, about the traitors, about ourselves, about anything else at all. For example, I could lie to Andrew and say, I've been to the Madonna Inn. I've been there, I know it well. When actually I've never even been in California in my life, sadly. However, my lie couldn't be that I feel Andrew's banishment from the show was fair and just, when in fact my real feelings are that it was a travesty. That would be a fake opinion. So we're looking for fake facts rather than fake thoughts and feelings. Andrew, are you ready to be a traitor this time and deceive me on the podcast?
I think I finally have to prove I've got what it takes. So yeah, no pressure.
Well, a little bit of pressure, but no pressure. So our game of the Trader Traitor begins now. So, Andrew, again, I spoke to Mike a couple of days ago. He said that he applied for the show when he's not really a reality TV fan. He hadn't even really heard of the Traitors until very recently, right before he applied. How familiar were you with the Traitors? What did you know about it? Had you seen it before?
Well, I was not familiar with the Traitors, except for one conversation that I had had 2 days earlier with some friends of mine who are like, you have to watch this incredible show. It's come out of the UK. They'd seen the UK version, and they're like, it is the best reality TV we've ever seen. It's called The Traitors. And I'm like, what is it? They started to describe it, and I realized it was like a game of Mafia,
Yeah.
which was my absolute favorite thing to do all through my teens and 20s. I remember I played Mafia in a house bus at the top of the North Island with hippies. I played Mafia on Trek in Peru, up in the Salcantay area, and crazy, crazy, great memories playing Mafia. And so I thought, well, if that's a TV show, I have to be part of it. And then by happenstance, 2 days later, there was an ad on my Facebook saying, "Hey, we're seeking, normies. We want regular people from around New Zealand to apply." And I just thought, well, this, it has to be a joke, right? They mention it. I haven't even seen an episode, and I see this casting call. But I submitted. I went for it, and within 48 hours, they had interviewed me. I had several more stages to get through, but I just had this funny feeling the guy who loves Mafia that much was going to get on the show, and here we are.
Here we are. It happened, yeah. And in episode one, it seemed like from your discussions with Paul, we got a couple of clips of you talking to Paul. It looked like you were saying you wanted to be a traitor. Is that the case? Did you want to be a traitor?
I'm so glad to be answering that question. I sure did. I think all those games of Mafia taught me that being a little bit naughty is more fun than playing by the rules. And this game is all about lies and deceit and treachery. And one of the conundrums of being a faithful is you have to try and figure out how honest you're supposed to be. How much treachery do you get away with? I would have really enjoyed throwing the book out the window and just embracing a life of trying to keep track of all the lies. And that's what I was prepared for and ready to do. But I didn't get that opportunity. But I had an awesome experience anyway.
So was it, when you weren't chosen by Paul at that first round table, were you disappointed? Were you happy to just sort of do your best as a faithful anyway?
I was devastated, Matthew. I cannot even describe how gutted I was. Yeah, my vision for what was going to unfold over the next couple of weeks definitely involved being a trader and getting selected. And I was so excited. I'm told I have good boy energy, and I think I would have tried to use that to my advantage, and be sneaky behind the scenes. I would have really, really enjoyed that. But I realized in that moment, I was like, oh wow, okay. So the vision in my head hasn't happened. I was thinking, well, hopefully maybe they'll recruit someone tonight. Maybe that'll be me. I guess we just have to hope that I last long enough to get recruited. So I started trying to think like a future trader, being like, okay, befriend the right people, don't piss off the wrong people, and don't get eliminated early. Which I was certain if I wasn't a trader, I was going to be an early out because those yellow pants were too memorable.
And you just mentioned sort of befriending the right people, and I definitely want to ask you a little bit about that. Firstly, you seemed to clock Jane as a traitor almost immediately. What was it about her what gave it away? Why did you latch onto her as a suspect?
Yeah, as we were leaving the very first ceremony at the round table where we've just chosen the traders, um, I was aware that that is often a good moment to spot some evidence, and I did also clock Mike with the jugular vein. Um, but I thought, that's not reliable. We're all in a high stress situation. And I've just seen the faithful get it wrong so many times based off those silly first impressions. And so, on the first day, that's what you've got. So, Jane, as we were leaving, we kind of merged lanes. And so we ended up next to each other. She looks me straight in the eye and she goes, "Are you a traitor? Are you a traitor?" And something about it felt deflective. It just didn't sit
Mm,
right with me. I thought she's trying to talk before I do so that she's in control. There was just something about it. And I didn't trust it at all because you can't rely on evidence like that. So
mhm.
that's why I was silent at the first roundtable because I had decided I was going to vote for Jane, but not for the same reasons as Terry, not because she drank water. And I just wasn't confident I was right, and I really liked Jane. So I kept pretty quiet until I turned my slate around and I shared that that had happened, but I didn't want to sway anyone with that story because I thought it was pretty circumstantial.
Mhm.
And she was a trooper about it. We had a conversation afterwards. She was like, "No worries." And then I decided, well, I definitely won't vote for her tomorrow. And that's, maybe the last time I was correct in the game.
Interesting. Now, you also talked very early on in the show about not wanting to vote with the group necessarily, particularly when a lot of the other players were closing in on Mark. And
hmm
obviously they were wrong to do that because he was a faithful. So on one hand you were right because they were going after the wrong person. I often talk about on the podcast how I personally I don't think it's a good I think it's a good strategy to just vote the way everybody else is voting, and just vote with the majority. But looking back on it, how do you feel about that decision to sort of just do your own thing?
I feel good about it. In that moment, I'm thinking I'm a faithful. My job is to tell the truth, to be honest, to be authentic. It's a game of lies where you have to try not to lie. Um, and I wrestled with that a lot later on, as I'm sure we'll get to. I did actually. I pretty actively was telling people don't vote for Mark. He had I'd had one conversation with him, and I felt that I observed the same things that other people observed in their social interactions with him, writing names in the pad and so on. But he's doing that before the ceremony. He's doing that
Mhm.
when we know for a fact that he's a faithful. He's demonstrated that that's how he behaves as a faithful. And while that could be an excellent tactic, it just felt like he would have been too easy for the producers to throw in there.
Mhm.
And so I thought it was likely he could be a recruitment later on. And I didn't want the Traitors to feel safe hiding behind him.
Yeah.
And he had just mentioned something along the lines of, being different socially and in different social groups and being somewhere on the spectrum. And I just thought, yeah, you know what? That tracks with the behavior that I'm seeing.
Yeah.
So when others were trying to get me to vote for him, I'm saying, no, let's not. I don't
Yeah.
think that it's him. Let's not vote for someone because of who they are, because I was worried I would seem traitorous and I would get voted out because of how I come across.
Mhm.
It's what always used to happen when I played Mafia. I would be be the loudest faithful, and you don't last long.
Yeah. And I'm jumping ahead a bit, but because you just mentioned Mark, you said Mark might be someone to recruit later on. Of course, you now you'll have seen that almost happened. How did you feel about him refusing and just sort of exiting the game?
I gasped. I had absolutely no idea that that was going to happen. Well, I guess the only people that would have known were the three people that were present for that moment. Um, and it was what for me that was probably the most electric moment of watching the entire series. And it's so cool watching something that you were part of, but seeing it from every other vantage point and learning what went on in the rooms you weren't part of. And that moment for me was just the moment that made it all worthwhile. And I know different people probably see it different ways. That's why I think it was such a perfect move. And for Mark, setting up the entire second half of that season and like spoiler tag, creating the first accidental traitor that I'm aware of, at least on the English language shows. And then the first, accidental winner, someone winning as a traitor who wasn't even meant to be one.
Yeah.
I just think that is iconic. Like that was to me a total boss move. Like I want all the memes of Mark. I think, if there's like a global all stars, if they don't take me, they better at least take Mark.
Yeah, he's a sort of traitor creator, inadvertent traitor creator.
Legendary, and it basically sunk Jane as well. I just think I cannot imagine an exit going more perfectly. So I think Mark absolutely won the game.
Yes. And it would be great to get Mark on the podcast. So, if you can get in touch, put a word in for me. Um,
I'm sure he'd be up for it if he can take a break between Dungeons and Dragons games.
well, exactly, of course, yes. Now, I'm going back to Jane. You mentioned voting for her. Um, you, you, it's something confused me when I was watching the show. You confused me, Andrew. Okay, you had previously said that unless I'm getting this wrong, unless I misinterpreted, you thought Jackie was a traitor, and therefore you kind of wanted to keep her close to you. You talked about her being like a guardian angel.
Mhm.
Why why did you not apply that reasoning to Jane as well? If you thought Jane was a traitor, why not also try and keep her close and not vote for her?
It comes from my evidence for Jane feeling weak, that just came from one look in the eye.
Mm,
It didn't, I applaud Terry for his confidence in trusting a glass of water to mean that much. I didn't share that. I felt like my evidence at that round table for Jane was stronger than Terry's. Um, and yet it was so circumstantial. I didn't trust it. I didn't trust that my initial read would be bang on the money. In
yeah.
hindsight, it's funny because I believe the first four names that I said on camera were Mike because of the red face, Jackie because I voted for her and I talked about why, and then on camera you saw me clock Whitney and Jackie because they came over to me. I think I said Jackie twice. I meant Jane because of what she had said to me, and then on camera I clocked Whitney and Jackie. Um, and yeah, as the game progressed, I felt like I accumulated better evidence. And so it's very funny to me watching it back in hindsight, realizing my total bingo game at the beginning was was more accurate than uh, where I started to get when I believed I was looking at logical facts and evidence and putting them in order. So yeah, I should have trusted that feeling that I had with Jane on day one a little bit more and gone for it. But I was very quick to discard it because I was pretty confident that information based on so little wasn't going to be meaningful in the game.
Yeah, yeah. Uh, I wanted to ask you a bit more about your relationship with Jackie because it was so fascinating and confusing to me. So we see in episode three what looks like you basically telling her that you know she's a traitor. Is that what's going on? And if so, why did you tell her that? Because I was really shocked watching that.
It was such a cool moment. I thought about that moment before I did it. And I know a lot of people were probably like, where did this come from? What's he doing? But from my, if you get into my head for a minute, my vantage point within the game at that moment, I wanted to be a trader so bad. I thought that um, I hoped to be a traitor. I was wanting to play a treacherous game, and then I thought I was going to be an early out because I'm a faithful. I'm dressing too loud. People are going to remember me. I'm going to get eliminated. I have to try not to seem too smart. I have to, be quiet and try and go unnoticed. And then Jackie had taken a real shine to me. And I mean, you saw when I first began to clock it on day two when she said something which I now know did not happen in the Traders Conclave. Um, but there were, Jackie had strong trader energy. I call her my Nana Macbeth. Um, and I just became attracted to the idea of her, marauding around the castle, killing us all. I just thought it was fun, and I found myself thinking, oh, I couldn't even take her out if that was true. Um, and so, yeah, I started to clock that she was a traitor. The reason that I told her in that moment was because I was hearing her name all day. I felt like she is not only on the chopping block, she's much heavier on the chopping block than Terry was. I was shocked actually that that round table was so divided that there were five names thrown out, that Molly got all the way to recount. And I thought to myself, I guess the traders are voting for Molly because there's so much more evidence for Jackie. Um, and so I decided in that moment, I thought, well, if she gets voted out tonight, I can't shoot my shot with her. Like this, that's it. This is it. So if she is my guardian angel and she gets voted out, then with her go, my higher chances of not getting murdered every night and my likelihood of getting recruited. What I need is for her to be not the first trader out so she can weaken them and then float my name for recruitment. Um, and so, yeah, I tried something that I don't know of anyone ever doing something like that before. And I thought, well, by then I was convinced she was a traitor. I felt
Mhm.
like I'd been seeing and hearing things that continued to confirm it. She had a point where we're in the car and she's saying, I'm going to be let's be the most faithful of the faithfuls. And I'm thinking like, really? And I started having to kind of look the other way. And I was like, I'm going to get outed as knowing that she's a traitor and she's going to take me down. Anyway, so in that moment, for better or worse, decided, no, I'm going to link myself to this traitor. I'm going to do something that a faithful shouldn't do, take that risk, and try to keep Jackie in the game. And I told her I wouldn't vote for her, and I strongly implied that I would be a great candidate for a recruitment if she had the opportunity. um, yeah, and well, it didn't exactly go how I wanted in that moment.
Sadly not, no. And as well as Jackie, you also suspected Noel, and you voted for Noel in episode three. And the thing is, Noel received the most votes of anyone across the season, the most of any faithful in any English speaking season anyway. What was it about Noel that made, because I couldn't really see it as a viewer, what was it about him that made him so suspicious to so many people for so long?
I'm sorry, Noel. Every vote after I was out, yeah, I felt sorry for him. I feel like, I have to take ownership of, in some part, starting that spiral. Um, I think there's a few things about Noel. I think for some people, he has that, classic Gen Z energy. He was they just showed those shots of him falling asleep and asking for coffee, very, very classic Noel. For me, it wasn't that. It wasn't his energy. I actually really liked him. Um and I think for other people it was maybe a slight culture shock in the sense that there's a very New York part of him. But I lived in New York for 5 years before I came on the show, before I moved back to New Zealand in the pandemic. Um and I felt like I knew him. I felt like I knew uh, his character. I understood the role that he was playing, and something about it, the more I thought about it, started to feel like a role. I started to feel like, oh, he's hiding behind this. I felt like I started to see signs of the pressure getting to him. Um, and I guess it's confirmation bias, it's false positives. What I was seeing evidently wasn't evidence of traitorism. And it's easy to say that now, but at the time, the more I looked for signs, the more I tried to be objective, the more I looked for evidence that would prove my little hypothesis to be incorrect, the more that he would say something, uh, well, and he said so many things, skipping ahead slightly, he said so many things on the day when we were singled out, and things that just me and Bree heard. And I felt like if all of us could hear this right now, his game would be over. He's just blown it wide open. I felt like there was zero chance that he could be a faithful. And obviously I was wrong, which is so weird. I was flummoxed when I realized how wrong I was. Um, but I was like, I owe it to the faithful to share what's happened and tell them what he said, because no one should get away with that brazen traitor. Like, I felt like he was really showing the cracks in his traitor game, and yeah, well, joke's on me.
What can you think of any examples of that? What kind of things was he saying that made you think he was a sort of brazen traitor?
Yeah, well, I guess if we start from earlier stuff, because I had a list, right? I went back to my room every night and I took copious notes. It was like a beautiful mind in there. Um, and on the first day, I wrote down all of the names of the players, and I'm terrible with names, so remembering 21 other names was an absolute miracle. And the last one that I remembered was Noel's name for some reason. And I didn't really have anything on him at that time. And but then over the coming days, I'm adding to people's notes, things that I noticed that might mean something, things I can think about later, things that they said. And Noel's list started to become the longest. And he had said he just often would say things that didn't sit correctly to me as someone who was experiencing what it's like to be a faithful and not necessarily having considered it. Um, right after right after the selection ceremony, we went back to chat, and we were talking, and I said, well, does anyone have any suspicions? And he immediately said, well, yeah, I've got a few, but I'm keeping them to myself. And I just thought that was strange. We're all looking around, all the faithful are going, nah, I don't have any suspicions. Like, we don't know anything. We have no evidence. And I'm thinking, not only does he have suspicion, he has multiple suspicions, and he feels comfortable saying it in a group, but he doesn't want to share it. I'm like, that's a really mature part of the thought process to reach. I'm sitting on a few names, but I don't want to name them. I just thought a faithful couldn't have gotten that far yet. There's something weird about that.
Mm.
Obviously, it wasn't enough to vote for him. That had happened before the first roundtable. His name was not the name that I shared, but when I reflected upon our interactions and things that I had observed that could mean something, that did stick out. Another was when Janae went home. She was the first person murdered, and we're at breakfast, and I was the person who told Noel he was in the last group, and I'm thinking, oh, Noel, that sweet kid, maybe he's gone home. Uh, and yeah, he comes in, he's like, whoa, what's going on? And I'm like, it's Janae. And I was hearing her name on everyone's lips. There's this general, hum of Janae in the room. And yeah, he kind of looked at me and is like, what? And I'm like, well, who went home? And he's like, no. And I'm like, it's Janae, Janae's murdered. And he's like, oh. And in hindsight, at the time, it didn't mean that much. Later, I thought, and I retroactively, felt like there had been a flicker of like, oh, how do I act in this moment? What do I do? I need to look like I didn't already know the name. I need to let him say it to me and not pick it up. Like, I felt like I was seeing the cogs turn. And
Yeah.
really, I think we're all overthinking everything in the moment. We're all, as a faithful as well, going, oh, this reaction is important.
Yeah, yeah.
People are going to watch this and I need to, so those cogs turn for a faithful as well. And
Maybe you
so I
just
kept
couldn't
looking for more and
remember who
more.
Ginny
Yeah,
was. Like you couldn't remember everyone's names.
that's true. Well, I had gotten them by then. His was the last.
Um, I wanted to ask about another player, this time who someone you had a really good relationship with, I think, who was Brittany. Can you tell us what did you like about Brittany so much?
I absolutely love Brit. Yeah, we're tight. She's become my bestie on and off the game. Um, I actually, because on day one, Janae was my first best friend. We sat next to each other in the car arriving. I felt really tight with Janae. We were both in that room with the eyeball and everything.
Mm.
And I was like, she's my girl. Right before that breakfast, I'm on camera there, and I'm saying, if there's one player who can make it to the end as a faithful, I'm sure it's Janae. I can't believe they didn't use it. And so when Janae was murdered, I'm like, oh no, like this, it's better than getting murdered yourself. But I'm like, not only am I not a traitor, but they voted out someone I never would have voted out. I was very upset. So I'm like, I need a new best friend. Enter Brittany. And so we ended up doing the minefield challenge together.
Mm.
We were together that whole day. And the more that she talked about her life and how much she loves her three kids and stuff, I just I felt like she was telling the truth, and I felt like she could trust her. And yeah, she's really really special. And so I got a huge bond for her, and yeah, my appreciation for Brit actually affected some of my actions uh, later in the game, in the sense that when it became sort of Whitney Brittany or Brittany Jackie in those moments, I'm thinking, oh no, what do I do? This is my best friend and my guardian angel. Like that's the worst thing that could happen. Having these votes that seem important and dividing people, and especially when I'm trying to be honest, like I just didn't want to be in that position so early. But I was so convinced that she was a faithful. And I thought, oh, if I become a traitor and she's still in the game, I'm going to have to either murder her or, lie to her or banish her.
Yeah.
Like, it's just like, oh, the real weight of what it would mean to be a traitor. I felt that heaviness when I thought about what I would have to do to my friend Brett if I turned, and I definitely seeing the weight on Bailey in those final episodes. I thought, yeah, I can only imagine.
We have to then talk about your banishment episode. How
Ah!
how did it feel being put on this sort of death row with you, Bree, and Noel?
Well, I saw it coming. I was as soon as they were singling out three players. I mean, I think, look, we all have main character syndrome, um, and so I'm thinking, of course, I'm going to be one of these three. And then as soon as the first name was Noel, and I looked over and his, I thought what I saw was a bad reaction to the surprise of being on trial. And I thought, oh, okay, so he's a traitor. He wanted to murder last night. He wanted to murder me. He couldn't murder me. So he had to do the next best thing. And here he is. Hopefully everyone saw what I just saw. And then they said Bree's name. I look over, she looks upset. And they said my name. And I'm like, yep, of course, because as soon as I heard Noel's name, I knew because we had this like budding rivalry. Um, and so, yeah, no surprise at all. As soon as as soon as they said three people, and then as soon as they said no, I thought, yeah, there's three of us. It just confirms my suspicions that he wanted to vote for me last night, and I just have to be grateful for this because the alternative was going home silently, like Whittemore and Janae the nights before.
Yeah. The next question is not really from me. It's from Joe, who is a Traitor superfan and who often co-hosts the podcast with me. And
Hi,
Joe,
Joe.
Joe asks, while you were grave digging with Bree and Noel, what else did you talk about that we didn't get to see? Because to me, it felt like we only got a couple of clips of the three of you off together, but there must have been so much more conversation going on between you. So what kind of things were the three of you talking about that day?
Joe, you know where the interesting stuff lies. This is yeah, it's we talked about so much, and I remember afterwards thinking, I wonder what's even going to make it and into the show because we had a lot of time in that moment. There were maybe 45 minutes to an hour and a half. I don't know. I didn't know what time it was. We talked about a lot. We talked about niceties at first. We talked about the weather and how pretty it was, and coffee and reading and stuff like that. And then I just felt this burden of I'm supposed to be honest, and I'm sitting here with this elephant in the room, believing that I'm talking to the person who put all three of us here, and we're thinking about the stuff that he said in the car that I was convinced prove him traitorous. And I'm just like, I can't just sit here and let you get away with this facade. My job is to be honest, and I failed at that yesterday with Jackie, and now I'm going to be truthful. And anyway, so I broke that seal on talking about the elephant in the room, uh, and yeah, it started off pretty nice. I said to him pretty directly, I believe that you put all three of us here. Don't try and hide it. And he didn't really defend himself. He didn't really say, "Well, I'm not a traitor," or like really anything particularly strong. But I told him some of what I said to you about uh, I know people like you. I know kids from New York, and you're it's all bravado. You're trying to seem like you're strong, but like I see you. You're not the only New Yorker here. I said he knew that I had lived there. You're not the only New Yorker here. I look at you and I see what you or like I see a scared person inside, some variation on that. And I thought for sure that was going to make it in, but I'm kind of glad it didn't. But then at some point around then, I actually took a moment because Brie was coming in as well, and she was very like yes and so it started to feel like a 1-2 punch, and I'm thinking I'm not trying to punch this guy. Like I like Noel. I think that he's a traitor, and that's a different thing from beating him up.
Yeah, yeah.
And so I actually took a moment and I said, uh, hey, I don't want this to feel like you're being ganged up on. Like, are you okay? And he was like, oh, I do feel a little bit like that. And I'm like, look, and I said, I just don't, this is not about making you feel a certain way. I said to him, I hate bullies. Bullies, uh, it's like one of my little triggers. I get really upset at people who bully, and I didn't want it to be that. And so I didn't like that dynamic there. And I should have seen in that moment that maybe it said things about the third person in the room, but I didn't. I had blinders. I had blinders for Noel. But anyway, I literally apologized to him and said, I hope you don't feel ganged up on. Um, and then it's good, I promise. Then we started talking. Brie tried to change the subject to something lighter, and she's like, "So no, you're from New York. Have you ever seen a Broadway show?" Um, and he is like, "Oh, so he'd seen like a play for school or something, but didn't really have much of an answer." And so I started to talk back. And so I used to work on Broadway. And Bree's eyes light up and she's very excited and animated. And I'm like, yeah, yeah, I worked on Mean Girls and Wicked. And she's just like, her eyes are bugging out. Um, and we talked about that for a little while. She was very excited. But a little fun piece of trivia for the episode is that later, at the round table in the middle of Bree's Flourish, she goes, "And you worked on Broadway, and you didn't think to tell me, I'm an actor." And it's like, I worked like I don't know what you did for a job 5 years ago. Like we're when we talk about the game, we don't run through our CVs. But yeah, she was for her. I think that moment was part of her confirmation
Mm.
that I was a traitor because I didn't tell her something she would find interesting early enough. But I literally had just told her, and it's only day four. I mean, what do you want from me? So yeah, he worked on Broadway. The new reason for being a traitor.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I was gonna ask you about next. Was Bree and this sudden turn on you at the round table? How did you had you seen that coming at all? How much of a shock was that?
A 100% shock. I thought I had a good relationship with Bree. I had pulled her out of the church in the previous day's mission as being the sweetest.
Oh yeah.
Um, and I was the one who was convinced that that was her title, which we still don't know if it was true or not. Um, and yeah, when I underestimated Bree, I'll say that for her. And I have to acknowledge that my strategy, my plan of go so big that either I go home or no goes home sort of did make her collateral damage. She would just get murdered and go quietly either way. And so I have to hand it to her. She got a moment at the round table. She got a big reveal. And I'm just gutted that it was me. I didn't see it coming. As soon as she did that, I I felt like my ship was sunk. I had a torpedo in the side. Uh, I had used all of my talking stick time, opening it up, trying to convince the faithful to not to be fractured because there are votes for five different people the night before, people going off about totally random stuff. And I was like, if we do that tonight, I'm just going to get murdered and I'm going to go home quietly. Um, I felt like I was the obvious one for murder and like no one wanted to murder me anyway. Um, And so, yeah, I did not see Bree's turn coming whatsoever. And as soon as it happened, I thought, oh, crap, I've completely overplayed my hand. Absolutely every choice that I've made today has been with the understanding that I knew Bree's position. And so going from being uh, my, the person that witnessed everything to being against me, I was like, I don't think there's a way out of this.
Yeah, by the time the votes were coming in or were about to come in, did you think there was a way out? Did you kind of know it wasn't going to go your way? Was there still a little bit of hope that maybe you could escape?
Pretty much as soon as Bree turned on me, I felt like it would be delusional to think that I could talk my way out of that because
Mm,
she's now telling everyone what happened today, which is the core of my offensive on Noel. Uh, I felt like there was no way that I could get out of it, but I was shocked in the sense that I'm like, well, this is the most traitorous behavior that anyone has displayed, and she has done strange things at every round table. This is the most traitorous, which I just pegged to being under pressure, being stressed. Everyone cracks a bit. I was like, well, I'm going a bit crazy. We all are. So I was quick to explain it away. But then, yeah, once she did that, I thought, oh, that's not only have I come in so hard for Noel that everyone's sort of a bit like, well, someone's telling us what to do, someone's trying to sway us. That's always a huge risk. But I was fighting for my life. Um, I genuinely, because I genuinely believed that Noel was a traitor. I believed that I had a 50% chance of murder because it was just me and Brie up for murder. And she had been kind of shifty. I was like, they'll kill me. They'll kill the one who uh, has been less erratic in this game. I'm the obvious murder. So the tightrope act is I have to have some heat on me. If I
yeah.
don't attract a little bit of heat so that they still murder her, then there's no way I can be here tomorrow. Um, So yeah, I was absolutely shocked into oblivion, and I thought, wow, there we go, well done. And yeah, obviously, I changed my vote at the last minute, which is probably the number one question that I'm getting from people around the world on Instagram. Very upset that I sent myself home essentially. Essentially, that's not a word. Uh, I sent myself home by voting for Bree, and I didn't actually think that Bree was a traitor in that moment, but she had done the most traitorous act. But in that moment, two things were going around my head. Firstly, I didn't want to be a bully. And I thought, oh my gosh, I've completely misread this. I suddenly was a lot less confident that no was a traitor. And actually, I think a change of vote would show that I was faithful, would show that I'm actually trying my best, listening to the evidence, and wrong sometimes, because traders have perfect information.
Yeah.
And I thought that that change of vote, this is the second thing that was running around in my head was the long game. And I thought, the door is closing on my opportunity to be here, because even if I walk out of here by the skin of my teeth, I'm probably dead in the morning. But maybe this extra heat will be enough to keep me around. But I thought, if after what Bree did, I'm no longer confident that Noel even is a traitor. If I manage to be here tomorrow, I'm getting banished tomorrow night because now I'm going to look traitorous. Even if he goes home and he's a traitor, I won't be the guy that got a traitor out. I'll be traitor versus traitor. My only hope was that if I succeeded at getting Noel out and he was a traitor, that the fact that I had changed my vote would be the only evidence anyone had that it most likely wasn't traitor versus traitor, because no one would fail to land that final blow, because that would be an uncomfortable traitor's tower. And so I thought that that would be some proof that I was actually a faithful, and perhaps if there had been a recount, people might have taken that as evidence into account. And so I'm pretty confident that if I had said Noel's name like I walked in intending, I'm pretty confident. Well, we know immediately there would have been a recount. And then our boards would have gone down and it would have been left to everyone else. And if you look at who voted for Bree, Joe was one of them. Joe was a close ally of mine. We saw him going for Noel later in the season. I'm very confident that there's no way he would have written my name down. And I have a feeling a few others might have changed their votes as well once they really realized that I was actually going to go home. So it would have ended very differently, but I would have had egg on my face. He would have got up there and said he was a faithful.
Yeah.
My jaw would have hit the floor because I really believed what I was doing. But I think, I probably would have been murdered the next night. If not, I probably would have been banished. So at that moment, I thought, I played my hand. I did what I did, and at least this way, I get some redemption from being a bully if I'm wrong about it. And so I have absolutely no regrets about changing my vote, acknowledging that there was a possibility that I could be wrong. I think that's a good trait in people, and I think it shows it wasn't personal. It wasn't a vendetta against Noel. It was a genuine belief that he was a traitor, and now we know an incorrect one.
Yeah. Was there some solace in seeing other players in the next episode talk about how annoyed they were about your banishment? Like Ciali, I think, said, "Oh, I'm so mad. I knew he wasn't a traitor." Did that make it feel a little bit better?
It did actually. I had no idea whether people would have said my name the next day. And Mike has since told me that he thought that my banishment was one of the first moments of collective sadness among the group. Which is weirdly a nice thing to hear. Yeah, it did. It did. There was some vindication in that, in knowing that there were other players who believed what I was saying and could see that I was fighting for my life. I really thought that my play was on the right side of desperate. What I mean is, like, a traitor wouldn't need to do what I did because they wouldn't be afraid of murder.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would have been able to be cool, calm, and collected if I had been a traitor in that moment. And I thought the energy that I brought would be some level of confirmation that I believed what I was saying, and I genuinely thought this was, likely to be my last day. But but I think I trusted a little bit too hard that people would be able to read between the lines.
Yeah. You've already mentioned seeing Mark later in the season turn down the chance to be a traitor. Were there any other what were the biggest moments or the biggest shocks for you watching the rest of the season after your exit?
Actually, one of them was in episode 4. We get into that round table, and I look dark, and I'm so upset. I'm like, oh, we dug our own graves today. This was heavy, and because it was a heavy thing to do, and I didn't know what their mission had been, but I assumed it was fun explosions or something. And watching it back and seeing people retching and thinking it's lamb colon. They've done horrible things that day, and I thought, wow, maybe the three of us had the lighter mission. um I really didn't know that till I saw it. And I think other moments, yeah, mission moments like that, seeing the electrocution and stuff like that, thinking, oh gosh, maybe maybe it's for the best that I didn't get that far. um yeah, and alliances that I didn't expect. Um, this season was just full of twists and turns,
Yeah,
and I could not have predicted who would make the final. I could not have predicted really anything that happened in any episode, and yet it sustained my attention so fully, which is a really cool experience for an unscripted show.
yeah.
I think it just goes to show this concept is lightning in a bottle. You just put the rats in the maze and they'll eat each other. Um, and that's essentially what happened.
Yeah. And so how do you feel about this is a spoiler alert in case for some wild reason someone is listening to this interview who hasn't watched to the end of the season. This is a spoiler. How do you feel, Andrew, about Bailey's win? Could you have called that while you were in the show with her?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. There was no part of me that thought that Bailey would win. I would have been shocked that she made it to the end game. And one of the great joys of rewatching the second half of the season was seeing her come out of her shell and
Yeah.
start to play her hand. And I think the fact that she was so underestimated is both why she was selected not for being a traitor, but for murder.
Yeah.
She was chosen for murder. And then ultimately why she succeeded as well, because um, it I don't think it made logical sense to people trying to figure out how the personalities would have chosen. She wasn't an obvious candidate for recruitment, and she just was handed a very beautiful opportunity, and she played it so well. And it was a joy to watch, and I told her so myself.
And lastly, my final question is a very important one. Since you didn't leave the show with any silver bars, have you paved your patio with something else?
That is a great question. Yes, yes, I was mid patio paving at the time. It was heavy on the mind. And yeah, the paving itself is pretty standard, like diamond tiles, inexpensive. But then we have some Mexican tiles. My husband is Mexican American. We have stairs. The stair risers have these beautiful tiles that we imported from Mexico. They're not silver, but my neighbors they had their own conspiracy theories. When my neighbors saw it, they're like, "We know you're the winner. We know you're going to win that show that you're on." They were cheering. Actually, when I was eliminated, I could hear my neighbors go, "No!" At that moment. It was delightful. But they were convinced I was the winner because they thought the patio was evidence. So there we
Yeah.
go. We're all going on
Uh,
false evidence.
well, sounds lovely anyway, if not silver. Um, so, Andrew, before we conclude the game that we have been playing, because we've been trying to deceive one another, where can we find you online? What should people check out if they want to find Andrew and what you're up to?
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram at Andrew Alamorta. I'll spell my last name because it's hard for people. It's Allem for Mary, Ora. which is a little portmanteau of my maiden name Alan and my husband's maiden name Mortar. We're the only Alan Mortars in the world, and so the handle was available. And I host a remote work blog for my employer called Out of Office. You can find that on LinkedIn. My employer's name is Crossover. Lots of people watch it around the world, so it's pretty cool.
Excellent. And I will link to you in the episode description. And when the episode is out, I will tag you on Instagram so people can find you really easily there. Now, we've been playing the Traitor, our game where we try and deceive one another throughout our chat. Andrew, have you lied to me at any point today?
I have. I did
Oh
tell
my
you a lie.
goodness. Well, you're
I
already
want to hear
beat.
your guesses.
Yes, you're already winning over Mike because Mike didn't even tell me a lie, so you've already won kind of in that way. I also lied to you. I have to apologize. I'm going to guess yours first.
Okay.
I've got yeah, I wrote some things down that I thought could be lies. I mean, there's so many things you could have been lying about. There's so much you told me about the show. Who am I to know? I. I wondered if you playing Mafia was a lie, and maybe you've never played Mafia your whole life. You said you hadn't seen the show until not that long before you applied. I thought that could have been a whole fabrication. I've written something else that I now can. Oh, you said that you played Mafia in Peru, and I wondered. I thought I bet you have been to Peru, but you didn't play Mafia there. Maybe there was something sneaky. You. This sounds like I just thought everything that you were saying was a lie. I didn't. You mentioned living in New York for 5 years, and I thought, that would be a great lie. But you mentioned New York so many times, I thought, no, he keeps coming back to it. It must be true. And I can sort of, I don't know if I'm imagining this, Andrew, but your accent is very interesting. You've got a sort of mix to me between New Zealand and an American accent. So I thought, that would explain his accent, that he's spent some time living there. You also, but this is, I don't know what one I'm going to go for, by the way. You said that you called Jackie Nana Macbeth, which is the best nickname ever, but you are a theatre person, so it would make sense that you would have a nickname like that. So I actually don't think that's your lie. I'm going to guess your lie is about playing Mafia in Peru.
That is a wonderful guess. Uh, and part of the reason I mentioned that was because I thought it would be a perfect red herring for you. I did play Mafia in Peru while I had altitude sickness. It kept us going every night. My whole troop loved it. My lie, Matthew, was a smaller lie. Um, I told you when we were digging our graves, we talked about working on Broadway, which I did. I did work on Broadway, but I said the shows were Mean Girls and Wicked. I never worked on Wicked. I sat
Oh,
next to the people that worked on Wicked. So I was around Wicked, but I never worked on Wicked. I did work on 30 or 40 different Broadway shows though, and Mean Girls was one of them.
amazing.
But yeah, Wicked I just appreciate from the audience.
Well done. When you were talking about working on the shows on Broadway, I thought, who am I to say that that is not true? I'm totally believing this, and I would love to. Mean Girls is in London right now, where I am, so I'm trying to go and see it at some point. Well done. You tricked me. Andrew, do you have any idea what I lied to you about?
I have no idea. I think I was focusing so hard on telling my lie that I didn't pay. I wasn't skeptical enough of you, and perhaps that says a thing or two about my gameplay as well. You seemed so truthful and everything. Um, no, I don't know what your lie was, Matthew. What did you? You have to take me out of my misery.
Okay. Well, we've both fooled one another. I was talking to you about Noel, and the fact that you voted for him, and I said Noel had the most votes of anyone across the season, which is true. And then I kept going, and I made up the next part. I said in fact, he said the most votes of any faithful in any season, and that part's not true.
Is
Um,
it not? I'm
no,
shocked because he got so far.
he did. weird. This is a bit of a spoiler. Someone on US season one had more votes even than that. So they didn't. Noel didn't quite beat the record, even though he said
Oh,
he wanted to.
okay, I know. Yeah, yeah, you're right. That's cool. So it's
So there
Noel
you
and
go.
that nameless person. I mean,
Yes.
that's cool for him. It was kind of fun feeling, after feeling some guilt for the fact that he went home, getting to watch him have a longer storyline. I feel like he deserved it after I came for him so hard incorrectly. Um, and yeah, I'm a Noel fan. I was supporting him by the end, and we have no beef.
Good to hear. I also a Noel fan and would love to have him on the podcast. So we shall see. Andrew, thank you so much for joining me. You've been a fantastic guest. I was really excited to talk to you. You've provided such brilliant insight into the show. You've given us so much information from behind the scenes and all this stuff that we didn't get to see in the edit. So I hope you have enjoyed being a guest today with me on The Trader.
It's been a lot of fun. Thank you so much, Matthew.
Okay, we shall talk soon. Take care. Stay faithful. Bye bye.
See ya.
Hello, Trader listeners. I really hope you enjoyed that interview with Andrew as much as I did. As always, you can leave reviews and follows for the podcast. Leave follows? That doesn't make sense. You can leave reviews and you can follow or subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube. I say this every episode, but I also then forget to actually check the reviews myself. And I had a lovely surprise a day or two ago to see that the podcast has over 30 reviews on iTunes, almost all 5 stars, except for one fairly unpleasant 3-star review, and 84 Spotify reviews with an overall rating of 4.7, which is fantastic. Thank you so much. If we could get to 100 reviews on Spotify by the end of this New Zealand season, I would be super grateful and happy. You can send me any questions or thoughts on the episodes. You can actually do that on Spotify. You can leave comments there, or you could follow the podcast on social media. We're on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube at the Trader Podcast, or on X at the Trader Pod. And if you're wondering why would I bother following on social media, I already listen to the podcast. Sometimes on social media I add little extra things, so I'll put in little videos, usually just of me talking about the podcast or talking about something to do with the Traitors. But quite often I'm in weird and wonderful places, so that's worth it alone, just to see me in strange places chatting to the camera and sharing all sorts of Traitors related things on my stories, in particular on Instagram. Anyway, you can also email me at thetradarpodcast@gmail.com, particularly if you have questions for any of the New Zealand contestants, or if there is anyone that you really, really want me to interview for the podcast from the season. Lastly, a big thank you to Anne and Danielle, who both donated to the podcast on the coffee page, which I often mention. That's ko-fi.com/Matthew Keeley. The link to that is in the episode description, and it's just a place where if you can make a one-off donation if you're listening to the podcast and you're enjoying it and you want to help me keep it going. And there will also be a link there to the British Podcast Awards vote. Until next time, which will be another interview with a guest contestant from Traitors New Zealand Season 2, keep us on your radar.